A Roman centurion stands on a rocky, limestone ridge, just outside the city gates. It is exactly noon in the Judean spring. Jesus is dying on the first day of Passover, and the festival of Passover. By strict, unyielding biblical law, the surrounding pagan nations look at a blood moon and see an omen. They see a random celestial terror. They panic in the dark, but Joel knows the Genesis clock. He knows the Moed. The bleeding moon is not an atmospheric trick. It is a cosmic siren. It is the visual alarm that the current era is running out of time. God uses the bright white light to schedule his feasts. He uses the empty, black sky to reset his months. But he uses the red light to announce his judgment. The machinery is shifting gears. The heavens are preparing for the final intervention. When the prophets speak of the moon turning to blood, they are declaring that the steady, predictable march of time is about to violently fracture. The old world is bleeding out. The final curtain is dropping. Centuries later, a fisherman stands up in the dusty streets of Jerusalem. The wind is roaring through an upper room. Tongues of fire are resting on men's heads. The massive festival crowd is completely bewildered. They hear their own native languages spoken by uneducated Galileans. And Peter raises his voice. He does not quote a local rabbi. He quotes Joel. He quotes the blood moon prophecy. He points toward the heavens. And he tells the ancient city that the final countdown has officially begun. But what Peter knows always begins on the night of a full moon. During a full moon, the lunar body is sitting, and what Joel only foresaw from a distance is exactly what triggered this final sequence. Something broke the clock first. Something threw the massive gears entirely out of alignment. Because before the moon turns to blood at the end of the age, the sun has to die in the middle of the afternoon. When modern astronomers run backward models of planetary alignments in the 1st century, they hit a hard-breast, unyielding mathematical wall on the afternoon of the crucifixion. The physics simply do not allow for the gospel account. The entire Hebrew calendar is strictly lunisolar, anchored entirely to the phases of the night sky. The Passover lamb is commanded by Levitical law to be slaughtered on the 14th day of the month of Nisan. In the relentless mechanics of a lunar calendar, the first day is always the Kodesh, the impossibly thin sliver of the new moon. By the 14th day, the lunar sphere has traveled exactly halfway around its orbital track. It sits directly opposite the sun, fully illuminated by the solar rays, hovering on the dark side of the Earth. It is a heavy, brilliant, full moon. This is the exact reason why a solar eclipse on Passover is physically impossible. For the solar disk to be obscured, the moon must slide precisely between the sun and the Earth. But on the 14th of Nisan, the moon is entirely out of position, on the exact opposite side of the Earth from the sun. It is entirely out of position. It is on the wrong side of the planet. The gear is locked in its designated place, waiting for the evening to rise over the Mount of Olives. So, when the blinding, midday Judean sun is suddenly swallowed in absolute blackness at 12 o'clock, the celestial machinery is actively violating its own ancient laws. The darkness that descends over the cross is not an astronomical coincidence. It is a cosmic undoing. The Creator who originally hung the Moed in the empty, watery void of Genesis is currently suffocating on a piece of rough Roman wood, and the clock reacts to the death of the clockmaker. The sky turns the color of bruised iron. The temperature drops rapidly in the Mediterranean spring air, chilling the limestone beneath the executioner's leather sandals. The light is not merely blocked by a passing celestial rock. The light is being actively stripped out of the sky. For 3 agonizing hours, the universe is forced to revert back to the formless, empty dark of the first day of creation. The moon, the faithful timekeeper, sits fully illuminated on the opposite side of the globe, doing exactly what it was programmed to do. It marks the appointed time. It signals the exact hour the true Passover lamb is bleeding out. It cannot step in front of the sun. It cannot cast a shadow on the earth. The darkness that falls over the cross The heavy gears of the divine calendar have finally clicked into their ultimate position. The ancient appointments are being kept. But even after the resurrection, after the sky clears, and the machinery of the cosmos continues its steady turn, the lunar clock is not finished, acting as a prophetic sign. Decades after the crucifixion, an exiled disciple looks up into a terrifying apocalyptic vision and sees the pale rock placed directly under the feet of a woman, screaming in childbirth. An old man sits on a prison island. The salt wind whips his weathered face. The Aegean Sea crashes against sharp, black rocks. His name is John. He is the last surviving apostle. The sky tears open above the island. A vision drops on him with terrifying weight. He looks up into the swirling firmament. He sees a woman. She is screaming in the sheer agony of childbirth. The blinding solar disk wraps her body like a burning coat. 12 brilliant stars circle her head like a crown of white fire, and resting directly beneath her bare feet is the pale, glowing disk of the moon. A beast watches her, a dragon with 7 heads. It is massive. It is blood red. It drags a third of the stars out of the sky with its tail. Is not a natural eclipse. It is a cosmic statement. Most people assume the moon in the biblical text. It stands in the dirt, breathing heavy, waiting to devour the infant the exact second it drops from the womb. Most people read Revelation 12 and skim right past the celestial topography. They see the sun, the stars, the moon. They assume John is just painting a chaotic, cosmic fairy tale. They think it is simply poetic exaggeration to show her glory. But John is a first-century Hebrew. He knows the Genesis mechanics. He knows exactly what the lunar sphere represents. It is the moed, the appointed gear, the relentless, grinding passage of days, months, and years. It is the master of time that dictates the rise of every pagan empire, the rotting of every earthly king, the slow decay of every passing generation. It governs the fading and the failing of everything under the sky. The old world is chained to its spinning face. But the woman is not governed by it. She is standing on top of it. The moon beneath her feet is not a decorative floorboard. It is a subjugated clock. The true people of God are no longer buried under the crushing weight of earthly time. The dragon cannot stop the birth. The child breaches the dark. The infant breathes the cold air. And before the red jaws can snap shut, the child is violently caught up to the throne of heaven. The woman flees into the desert, is just part of the background scenery. A pale, dead rock orbiting the earth to give ancient shepherds. She runs into the barren rocks. God prepares a place for her. The dragon thrashes in the dirt, furious, screaming, making war with the rest of her offspring. The ultimate victory is already secured in heaven. The eternal timeline has breached the earthly calendar, but the beast is not dead yet. And as long as that ancient gear keeps spinning in our night sky, we are left in a brutal tension. We live in the fallout of that cosmic war. And navigating that fallout feels exactly like watching a light that refuses to stay consistent. We are a species exhausted by our own inconsistency. We wake up in the cold, blue glow of a digital alarm clock, and we subconsciously expect ourselves to operate like the sun. We expect to rise every single morning with the same blinding intensity, the same burning output, the same unwavering capacity to generate heat and light for the people around us. We stare at the harsh, artificial lights of our modern workspaces, or we lie awake, listening to the low hum of a refrigerator at 2 in the morning, and we measure our worth by our relentless, unbroken productivity. When our spiritual energy dips, when our faith wavers, when the heavy shadow of a depression or a sudden failure falls across our daily routine, we assume something is fundamentally broken. A little visibility at night, a poetic prop for the Psalms. We treat it as divine decoration, but we were never designed to be the solar disk. If you look at the physical reality of the lunar surface, it is a barren, scarred rock floating in an absolute vacuum. It possesses no internal furnace. It has no core of nuclear fire. It cannot produce a single photon of its own. Every ounce of brilliance it casts across the dark, churning surface of a midnight ocean is entirely borrowed. It only shines because it remains perfectly positioned in the sightline of a greater, burning star. And yet, its reflection is never static. Because it moves, its light fluctuates. Sometimes it hangs huge and heavy over the horizon, bathing the earth in a surreal, silver daylight. Sometimes it is a razor-thin crescent, barely visible through the thick clouds of an autumn storm. And sometimes, for a few quiet days, it vanishes completely. The sky goes entirely black. The darkness is not a failure of the moon. It is the required rhythm of its orbit. We expect our spiritual lives to look like an eternal midday. We demand a constant, shadowless noon from our own hearts. But the ancient Hebrew rhythm was anchored to a shifting, changing gear. The Moed teaches us that there is a sacredness to the waxing and the waning. There are appointed times for brilliant, overflowing clarity, and there are appointed times for sitting quietly in the pitch black. But if you look closer at the original Hebrew words used to forge it, at the blood-soaked battles fought beneath it, waiting for the narrow sliver of renewal to breach the horizon, the empty sky is just as holy as the full illumination. We live in the brutal tension of this fading light. We reflect the warmth of a resurrected king, but we do so while still trapped, in bodies that age, in minds that exhaust, in a world that still bleeds. We orbit through the shadows, but this spinning, fluctuating system was never meant to last forever. There is a final, easily missed detail at the very end of the biblical narrative, and it reveals exactly what the Creator plans to do with his ancient clock when the story finally finishes. The Creator hung a silent rock in the watery void, and the exact appointments of heaven were set into motion. A watchman spotted a hairline fracture of light in the dark, and a wandering nation blew silver trumpets to begin again. A commander shouted over the blood-soaked dirt of Ajalon, and the heavy pendulum of the cosmos froze in its tracks. A prophet stood in a stripped-parted, ruined orchard, and saw the timekeeper turn to copper-red blood to signal the end of an age. A Roman executioner stood in absolute midday blackness and watched the ancient machinery shudder at the death of its maker, at the ancient prophecies tied directly to its shifting phases. You start to see something the decorative reading completely misses. An exiled apostle looked up through the stinging salt wind and saw the spinning calendar crushed beneath the bare feet of a screaming woman. And a new city finally descends from the clouds onto the new earth, and the ancient nightlight is discarded forever. Because the Lamb is all the fire it needs. Same gear, same God. But here is the part I keep coming back to. Not the bleeding sky of the apocalypse, and not the frozen orb over a Canaanite battlefield. It is the watchman standing on the limestone ridge, squinting into the bruised black twilight, looking for the Kodesh. The impossibly thin sliver of returning silver. The empty sky is not a graveyard. It is a womb. If you are in a season where your spiritual life feels completely swallowed by the earth's shadow, if the dust is dry in your throat, if your capacity to generate warmth is entirely exhausted, and you are sitting in the dark, wondering if the machinery of your faith is permanently broken, breathe. Do not panic in the quiet. You are not required to be the blazing sun. You are allowed to wane. You are allowed to sit in the pitch black and wait for the reset. And may the God who engineered the midnight just as meticulously as he engineered the blinding dawn sit with you. The moon is not a nightlight. It is a mechanism. It is the grand, ticking gear of the ancient world, in the quiet, and bring you out into the crescent of a new season, carrying a grace you could not have found in the light. The dust is still settling from a screaming crowd. The dry wind carries the scent of sweat and warm iron. God did not simply hang a white orb in the sky to break up the dark. He installed a massive, silent alarm system to dictate the rhythm of human history. When it glows, when it hides, when it bleeds red, it is doing exactly what it was engineered to do. And understanding exactly what it is designed to say changes how you read the darkest afternoon in the first century. But to feel the weight of this ancient clock, you cannot start at the crucifixion. You have to go back to the very moment the gear was wound, back to a watery void of absolute black, before a single human breath had ever been taken. Go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. We are on the fourth day of the ancient creation narrative. The waters have been pushed back, the dry land has breached the surface, and vegetation is unfurling in the damp soil. But the upper sky is still an empty, static expanse. Then God speaks into the black canvas of space. He commands lights to appear in the vault of heaven to separate the day from the night. And he gives the specific reason for their existence. Let them serve as signs to mark sacred times, and days and years. And a rabbi from Nazareth is slowly suffocating on a wooden beam. And then, the sky breaks its own rules. The word your English Bible translates as sacred times or seasons. Here is the Hebrew moed. It is a word that echoes all the way through the ancient texts, appearing over 200 times in the Old Testament. Its root is the verb ya'ad, which means to fix upon, to designate, or to summon to a specific location. A moed is not a generic span of time like summer or winter. It is an appointed time. It is a set, unchangeable appointment on a calendar. Modern people organize their lives around the sun. We measure a year by a complete orbit, setting our digital alarms by the solar dawn. But the ancient Israelite mind was locked to the night sky. The solar year determined the seasons of the dirt, but the lunar cycle determined the seasons of the soul. Later in the biblical narrative, when Moses builds the great portable sanctuary in the wilderness, it is called the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting. It is the physical, heavy canvas structure where God's unseen presence intersects with human flesh. And when God dictates the strict, unyielding schedule for the 7 great Israelite festivals in Leviticus 23, the days filled with the rich smell of roasting lamb, the deafening blast of ram's horns, and the sharp taste of bitter herbs, he introduces them by saying, "These are the Moedim of the Lord, the holy convocations, which you shall proclaim at their appointed times." That root changes everything about the fourth. The sun vanishes, complete. Crushing darkness drops over Jerusalem like a heavy winter cloak. It does not pass like a thick storm cloud. Day of creation. When God hangs the lunar sphere in the empty dark, he is not just giving ancient shepherds a way to navigate a desert at midnight. He is establishing the exact dates for his divine interventions. The lunar cycle is the visual interface of heaven's schedule, a glowing white dial turning against the black void, meticulously counting down to the exact moments when the Creator intends to step into human history. The moon is not a passive rock. It is a scheduled rendezvous, but a clock is only useful if you know how to read its hands. And in the ancient Hebrew mind, the most crucial moment of the lunar month was not when the moon was massive and blindingly bright. The most important signal the sky ever sent happened the moment the light completely disappeared. A watchman stands on the highest ridge of the city. He squints into the western twilight. The wind bites at his face. The sun has dropped below the jagged hills. The sky bleeds from violent purple into a deep, bruised black. He is looking for a sliver of light, a hairline fracture in the dark, a sliver so impossibly thin, a passing cloud could erase it completely. He spots the pale curve. He shouts the signal. Down in the stone courtyards, a priest raises a hammered silver trumpet to his lips. He fills his lungs. It does not last for a few fleeting minutes. It sits over the executioners for 3 relentless hours. A sharp, piercing blast shatters the quiet of the evening air. Another trumpet answers. Then, another. The metal sings over the rooftops. The noise rolls out over the valleys. The new moon has arrived. The month begins. In the ancient Israelite system, this trumpet blast is an unbending command. Numbers chapter 10, verse 10. God tells Moses to blow the silver trumpets at the beginnings of their months, standing over the smoke of their burnt offerings. The Hebrew word for month here is Hodesh. It literally means new moon. It comes from the root Chadash, which means to renew, to repair, or to rebuild, every 29 days. The sky goes completely dark. The moon vanishes. It is swallowed entirely by the Earth's shadow. The surrounding ancient cultures fear this empty phase. The pagan empires panic. They assume their lunar deities are dying in the sky. They light fires on the hillsides. They chant. They sacrifice. They try to wake the dead rock. But Israel does not panic. Israel waits in the quiet. The empty sky is not a celestial death. It is a divine reset. The sky goes black so the great gear can start turning over again. Every single sacred festival on the calendar depends on this exact moment. Passover requires the 14th day. The Feast of Tabernacles requires the 15th, but no priest can calculate the dates. No family can pack their bags. No lamb can be chosen until the watchman sees the Kodesh. The birds stop singing. The temperature plummets. You can hear the blind panic spreading in the dark. The sliver of returning silver. The trumpet sounds. The blood of the sacrifice hits the heated bronze altar. The thick smoke rises into the night air. A whole nation aligns its heartbeat with a tiny crescent of light. The moon dictates the sacrifices. It dictates the feasts. It dictates the marching. It is a faithful, silent timekeeper spinning through the heavens, pulling a wandering people through the dust of the wilderness. But centuries later, the timekeeper does something terrifying. It stops acting like a clock, and it becomes a weapon. When you study the ancient military chronicles of the Israelite conquest, you eventually collide with a passage in the book of Joshua that breaks every known law of physics. Joshua is locked in a brutal, exhausting campaign against an alliance of 5 Amorite kings. The dust is choking the rocky passes of the ascent of Beth Horon. The Israelite infantry is swinging heavy bronze weapons until their muscles tear and their lungs burn. They hold the tactical advantage. But the daylight is bleeding out of the evening sky. The darkness is coming rapidly. And with the darkness, the enemy will scatter and slip away into the deep limestone ravines. So Joshua looks up at the darkening expanse, and he speaks a command that echoes through the centuries. The rustle of leather armor as soldiers drop their spears. Most people read this account in the Gospels. He tells the blinding sun to stand still over Gibeon. But then, he adds a second, highly specific command. He points his hand toward the valley of Ajalon, and he orders the pale, rising moon to halt. If visualizing the sheer weight of these ancient texts is stirring up questions you have never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the commander speaks the impossible. The question that perplexes modern military historians and biblical scholars alike is why he addresses the lunar body at all. If Joshua only requires illumination to finish a bloody battle, the solar disk is entirely sufficient. The sun provides all the necessary visibility to track the fleeing Amorite armies across the treacherous terrain. The moon adds absolutely nothing to the tactical advantage of a daytime slaughter. So why speak to the pale rock hanging over Ajalon? Because Joshua understands the intricate mechanics of the Genesis cosmos. He is not merely asking for a few extra hours of battlefield visibility. He knows that the lunar cycle is the moed, and assume it was just a dramatic weather event. Or, if they look for a scientific explanation, the sacred appointed gear that dictates the relentless passage of the calendar. The Hebrew word translated as "stand still in this passage" is damim, which literally means to be silent, to grow numb, or to cease functioning. By commanding the moon to freeze in its orbit, Joshua is effectively reaching into the heavens and grabbing the heavy pendulum of the cosmic clock. The command over the valley is not a request for a nightlight. It is the suspension of time itself. The machinery of the heavens locks its massive gears. The earth holds its breath. The shadows stop lengthening across the blood-soaked dirt. And a human war finishes its grisly work under a silent sky that refuses to turn. The moon proves it is entirely subject to the voice of the sovereign who hung it in the firmament. But this is only a temporary pause in the divine system. The gear eventually starts turning again. The calendar resumes its march. The centuries roll forward in their appointed cycles. And, as the biblical narrative deepens, a terrifying day on the horizon, when the moon will not merely freeze in the sky, but when it will violently change its nature. They assume it was a sudden solar eclipse. But a solar eclipse is astronomically impossible on this specific afternoon. The swarm arrives. The sky darkens. The air hums with a deafening vibration. Millions of wings block the sun. They drop onto the green fields. They strip the olive trees down to the bare, white wood. They devour the grapevines. The land goes quiet. The crops are gone. The dirt turns to powder. The prophet Joel stands in the ruined dust of the Judean hillside. He looks at the stripped branches. He sees a localized catastrophe. He feels the hunger setting into the bones of his people. And then he looks up. His vision pierces through the local famine. He sees the end of the world. He speaks a prophecy that ripples through the next 1,000 years. He does not talk about insects. He talks about the cosmos. He sees a day when the earth will shudder, the heavens will tremble. And then he names the two great timekeepers of Genesis. The sun turns into darkness. The moon turns into blood. This is the great and terrible day of the Lord. When a total lunar eclipse happens in the ancient world, the shadow of the earth falls across the lunar surface. The blue wavelengths scatter in the atmosphere. The red wavelengths bend around the edges of the planet. The moon glows with a deep, violet copper hue. It hangs heavy and bruised in the black sky. It looks like a fresh wound,